Michael Davitt, an Irish patriot and politician, contributed to Irish farmers' capital, health, and ability to organize for Irish independence. Although the Irish didn't receive independence until 16 years after his death, in 1922, Davitt's legacy of free Irish-owned farms contributed to funds, food, and shelter for the Irish revolutionaries. Davitt was essential to the demise of the British landlords, which gave the Irish farmers freedom, a freedom that would win the Irish War for Independence soon to come. While in control of the island, the British hired landlords to watch over the Irish peasants and ensure that they paid their taxes. However, the farmers who were being watched by the British landlords were brutally treated, exposed to unfair payments and excessive taxes. This led to many evictions of these peasants, fueling the revolutionary spirit of the time. One of these revolutionaries was Michael Davitt. Michael Davitt was born in the county of Mayo, in Western Ireland, on March 25, 1846. Born to poor yet educated parents, Martin and Catherine, he experienced poverty at its greatest, living in the height of the Great Famine. At age 4.5, he was evicted from his home, fueling the revolutionary spirit inside of him for the rest of his life. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Sheehan, a United Nations ambassador, worked with Davitt's future son, Cahir Davitt, and recognized the impact of the eviction on Michael Davitt's life.
He had suffered eviction aged 4 years, and this created a great sense of injustice in Davitt.
Due to the horrid conditions in Ireland, Michael and his family, like many others, moved to England to try and find a better life. On May 8, 1857, while working in a cotton mill, the 9-year-old Michael caught his arm in a spinning wheel. The damage was so bad his arm had to be amputated. He never received compensation. However, the injury allowed Davitt to receive an education, which led to his eventual involvement in political movements. No longer able to work, Michael attended school for several years, enhancing his education. He especially enjoyed studying about Irish history, mainly pertaining to historical, social, and political movements. This education sparked a radical interest inside of him, leading to him joining the Irish Republican Brotherhood, the IRB, in 1865. Soon after, Davitt began to travel around England and Scotland, smuggling arms into Ireland. He evaded arrest at a failed attempt to secure arms at the Chester Castle raid on February 11, 1867, but was not so lucky a few years later. On May 14, 1870, Davitt was arrested while awaiting a delivery of arms. He was sentenced to 15 years at Dartmoor prison for treason. However, he was brutally treated and put in solitary confinement, and when word of this reached the Irish public, outrage arose. His treatment, along with his unfair trial, led to public uproar and his release from prison after 7 years. On December 19, 1877, he was released, and upon his return to Ireland, was given a hero's welcome. Davitt's ideas about politics changed while he endured his prison sentence, and he began to follow noticeably more nonviolent policies after his release. Davitt's later movements of nonviolence and non-aggression were known to directly impact the policies of men like Mahatma Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Historian Carla King even went as far to compare Davitt with the later Nelson Mandela. However, the most important result of Davitt's change to non-aggressive policies was the increase in interest of the protest against the British, as his change inspired many of the peace-loving people around the country and the world to his cause. His nonviolent policies began with the expulsion of the terrible landlord, Captain Charles Boycott. Captain Boycott, a notoriously ruthless landlord in northwestern Ireland, was known for his slyness at playing the Irish against each other. With his high taxes and unfair demands, many Irish became homeless under his supervision, which caused much tension, as the farmers had to fight each other for the limited number of houses remaining. Davitt, however, was able to lead the Irish farmers to strike against boycott. Unable to get the peasants to work, and with the growing threat of a rebellion against him, Boycott fled Ireland in 1880. The expulsion of Boycott led to many peasant rebellions against their warlords, and, because of the example that Davitt set, many farmers got their land back. It was these farmers who would finance the rebellion and the War of Independence that would come later. Davitt's work against boycott would eventually coin the term boycott, as used today. After expelling boycott, Davitt resumed his traveling, giving speeches around the nation, inspiring many to rise to his cause. He was arrested again in 1881, but this arrest just fueled the raging spirit of the other revolutionaries. When he was released, he helped pass legislation to better the situation for the Irish peasants. The first of these was the Irish Land Act of 1881. This Land Act gave Irish tenants security and replaced the ineffective and British-influenced Land Act of 1870. The new Land Act did a great deal to help the peasants in the short term, as, by 1882, it reduced rents by almost 20%. However, Davitt saw the need for long-term security, something assuring and protecting the farmers' land and property. Because of this, he soon helped pass more legislation, the most important being the Ashburn Act of 1885. Also known as the Irish Land Purchase Act, this piece of legislation would give tenants the ability to pay for limited amounts of land and would go far to lay a suitable foundation for solving the final problems of the land situation. Davitt soon began to travel worldwide in order to raise awareness for the cause. His travels would get more people outside of the country interested and sympathetic to the revolution after his death, proving once again his worth to the later fight for independence. His journeys also led him to meet Mary Yore, whom he married in 1886. They received a house as a wedding gift from the people of Ireland, a monument to recognize the deeds that Davitt had accomplished. However, due to his ailing health, Davitt would, for the rest of his life, be involved in politics. One of the most influential politicians that Davitt worked with was one of Ireland's premier revolutionaries, Charles Stewart Parnell. As president of the Irish National Land League, Parnell's influence across Ireland was sensational, as was his inspirational and charismatic nature. Parnell appointed Davitt as secretary of the Irish National Land League and leader of the Mayo Land League. Davitt, along with Parnell, worked on developing a policy of home rule through the 3 Fs: fair rent, fixity of tenure, and free sale. However, the pair began to split as Parnell began to distance himself from Irish moral views, something that Davitt couldn't bring himself to do.
The Catholic Church did not side with Parnell in his personal stroke marital difficulties. Effectively, the change in public opinion based on strict views on morality worked very much against Parnell and effectively ruined him. By that stage, the difference in outlook between Davitt on the one hand and Parnell on the other was quite striking, and the fallout which impacted on Parnell did not impact upon Davitt at all.
A firm politician and decider, much like he was early in his career, Davitt would lead the Irish in the House of Commons, ensuring that they would get just and fair legislation for the rest of his life. He would die soon later, on May 30th, 1906, due to blood poisoning at the age of 60. His death pulled the entire country into mourning. Davitt's legacy included passing many acts of legislation on behalf of the Irish people, even if it required turning against his political allies and longtime friends. Davitt's influence in achieving legislation, ridding the country of many landlords, and fighting on behalf of the Irish people is undeniable. His influence in allowing Irish farmers to obtain land allowed for an Irish victory in the War for Independence and freedom for the country. His fight for the ordinary people and farmers of Ireland displayed some of the greatest acts of patriotism in Ireland's rich history. His tombstone reads, "Blessed is he that hungers and thirsts for justice, for he shall receive it." From out the heart of Erin leapt a flame, the soul of Michael Davitt, burning bright. It followed, teaching mankind without blame, to reach the summit of fair freedom's height, and in human hearts a sacred memory. The noble name of Davitt shall not die.